is Dr. Nate, and we are here with the first module in Module 2. We are going to be talking about misogyny in music, and specifically we're going to look at hip-hop. Now, I don't want you to think that hip-hop is the only genre of music that has misogyny and even homophobia in it, because it's not. However, there's a lot of academic research, a lot of my academic research has gone into hip-hop, so we're going to talk about that first and see how that can be translated to a more broad generalization of the presence of misogyny in music in general across genres and across the world. So let's go ahead and do a brief recap about the study of sexuality. Those of you who have had any type of media theory classes or training will recognize these two different theories. People who have studied different types of sexual content in the media have come to one of two conclusions. One, media either will encourage and foster a sense of promiscuity, of action that will make people go out and either commit a sex crime or do different types of sexual actions, or it will actually purge feelings that individuals have. So the first one is going to be called the trigger hypothesis, and this basically says that exposure to any kind of sexually explicit material, right, has to be sexually explicit, will cause a response in some individuals, not all individuals, some, that will provoke them in a way that may lead them to commit a sex crime such as rape or indecent exposure, right? This is a very extreme case right here. Other people, however, believe that we as human beings are innately sexual creatures. We want to have sex, and we have these urges to go out there and just ravage people, I guess. I don't know. So they have come up with this safety valve theory. And basically, it's the opposite of trigger hypothesis. It tells us that exposure to sexually explicit material will satisfy whatever urges might cause a person to commit a sex crime, right? So in one sense, media is encouraging us, and in the other one, it's actually pacifying us and satisfying those urges. What is important here to note is that media does not account for 100% of any type of responses in people. We have to consider people contextually, their predispositions. We have to consider maybe their lived experiences, their predisposition to violence. Maybe they've gone through violence, they've gone through rape, they've gone through sexual assault, or maybe they have maybe something mentally or physically that encourages some type of behavior or discourages it, right? So media is only a piece of the puzzle, a piece of the pie that we need to consider when we're looking at how media affect individuals. What we do know is that media does affect individuals in some type of way, and which is why we do so much research to find it out. We also have done a lot of research in the past on sexual content in terms of looking at the content itself, doing a content analysis or a textual analysis to kind of categorize the different types of content that is out there in terms of sexuality. What we know is that sexual content is usually performed and portrayed from a masculine perspective, right? The male gaze. It centers on heterosexual intercourse. And when there is lesbianism, it is for the enjoyment of the man, not necessarily for two women to be together to enjoy each other, but to perform for the pleasure of a man. There is group sex, anal, oral, genital contact, and visible ejaculation. That is majority portrayed in pornography. It also spotlights the sexual desires of men, and women are seen as sexually promiscuous and obsequious, which means they are subservient to men and do whatever they tell them to do. There is some different themes that emerge in different types of content. If we're looking at pornography, this is probably more apparent, but it is also very visible in different types of sexual content across different media platforms. So there's this coercive or violent theme that emerges sometimes, which is rape myth, which talks about women enjoy being dominated and abused. They enjoy violence during sex. If they say no, doesn't mean no, just keep on asking or force them to because they secretly really want it. This is rape myth, not true. And this is portrayed especially in pornography a lot. And then we have sexual fantasy themes, right? So these sexual situations that are idealized, such as like the teacher and student, the schoolgirl, the Catholic schoolgirl, football player and cheerleader, these different types of scenes that are usually more erotic than they are violent than anything, right? They're more about sexual and fantasy. Another thing too we have to clarify too before we get into this is the difference between indecency and obscenity. When we look at different types of sexual lyrics, specifically in music content, they are allowed in certain situations. Now, obscenity is something that we have a warning for. So we have like obscene content. We see that there is warning labels, right? Parental warning labels that we have now on different types of musical content that is supposed to warn us about these different types of content that's here. Usually it's more about explicit nature than indecency and obscenity, but I'll talk a little bit about the difference between the both, right? So the biggest problem between this type of regulation in terms of legalities is that there is a very highly subjective way in which we decipher between indecency and obscenity. Indecency is language that in context depicts or describes in terms patently offensive as measured by contemporary community standards for the broadcast medium sexual or excretory activities or organs. So indecency is restricted to a time of day where there is a reasonable risk that a child may be in the audience, right? So if something is indecent, it is still allowed in certain contexts, right? But the language in which we use by the FCC to decipher that is really subjective and up to whoever is in charge of saying, yes, it is, no, it isn't. When we talk about these hours that children are not supposed to be awake, this goes way back to like the 1930s. It's something that we call safe harbor. And safe harbor is usually a time between like 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. or even 10 p.m. in some spaces, if it's more conservative, and 5 a.m., where parents are supposed to be good and put their children to sleep. So they're not supposed to be watching public television or anything that's broadcast or listening to the airwaves. And so because of that, there is a lot more leniency in the type of content that can be viewed or listened to in terms of public broadcast. Obscenity is something also that is never permitted on the airwaves. So if something is indecent, it can be indecent but still allowed in safe harbor or allowed in certain circumstances where there is a firewall. That might be like on HBO or Showtime, where purchasing that actually is considered a firewall because you have to be an adult over 18 to purchase HBO. Therefore, it is assumed that you're an adult watching it. But obscenity, though, is never allowed on public airwaves. This again is very subjective as well. We try the Miller test, or we use the Miller test to establish whether or not something is obscene. And again, very subjective. So listen to this. These are the three things that needs to be met. An average person applying contemporary community standards must find that the material as a whole appeals to the prurient interest. Again, lots of subjective language here. What's an average person? What are contemporary standards? And then what do we consider a community? How local or how big or how small is that? And then what is the prurient interest, right? And who gets to determine that? The second one, the material must depict or describe in a patently offensive way sexual conduct specifically defined by applicable law. Again, who is the judge about what is patently offensive? And then who gets to determine which law is applicable to that? Very subjective. The material taken as a whole must lack serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. I mean, just if we take artistic value by itself, art is highly subjective. So again, it's kind of this pick and choose. It's determined upon local, states, and even federal judiciaries to be able to determine what is obscene and what is not. And the law has a lot of gray area on purpose so that we can make these different decisions based on probably the standards that are set by these localized different types of officials, right? So hip-hop research. What have we done in terms of hip-hop research? There's been lots of individuals who look at hip-hop research, and there's kind of this two different camps of hip-hop right now. Hip-hop in and of itself was created out of this existential angst by Black African Americans living in the boroughs of New York, right? So it came out of the Bronx. Brooklyn was also a big part of the inception of hip-hop. But hip-hop was a way in which individuals who were being marginalized and oppressed by society were able to come together and celebrate their African American culture, their Black heritage, and their Black art and music, and create a sound and a genre that spoke to them, that celebrated them. So hip-hop had rap, and it had MCing, it had beatboxing, it had breakdancing, it had graffiti, all of these things that were celebrated. Since then, hip-hop has become highly commercialized and commodified, and it has turned into, or some people argue that it has turned into a music that has been taken over by the rich white elite as a way for them to make money, but also to put on this kind of a show by Black men and women to be able to perform. So one camp of research says hip hop is bad. We need to find a way to get it back to where it came from. We need to get it back to its roots. It's all about misogyny, homophobia, violence, guns, killing, and shooting. The other side of this says no, hip hop is what it was initially created to do. Hip hop is a way to speak about real life experiences. And if hip hop is violent, it's because real life is violent. And those African American, predominantly rappers and singers, right, are African American. If their music is violent, it's because their lives are violent. If they're homophobic or misogynic, it's because their lives are. And until we can improve their quality of life and change that, then the music will continue to reflect their real life experiences. So we have these two different camps of scholars. What we do have an agreement, though, is that there are some lyrics in hip hop that are problematic, right? They are misogynistic and homophobic. So different types of research have found that there's these themes of power, objectification, violence against women. There was also this correlation between people who consumed rap and hip hop and had high misogynistic thinking. There was this positive correlation there. There's also these conflicting images that leave the audience confused because sometimes women specifically who are out there promoting different types of video, like Nicki Minaj, Beyonce, that are highly sexualized, they are empowering, right? They're feminist. They are saying if a man can do it, I can do it too. Sometimes it promotes female subjectivity while also promoting female objectivity concurrently. This research really focuses on the type of audience that is consuming this, and maybe they do not have the media literacy to be able to tell the difference between the two. But that is another theme that has come up in some of these researches in the past. Violence and aggressive behavior are central tenets because some rappers promote youth to embrace a thug life. The only way to be able to make it out of the hood or survive the hood is to be a thug, and the only way to become a good rapper is to be authentic, to be a thug, these types of things. The media and popular movies have also done their part to glamorize the lifestyle of being a thug or being a gangster or being a rapper, right, or hip-hop mobile. Usually this authenticity and masculinity that is tied to it is something that is promoted through movies. Trisha Rose is a researcher who comes out of Brown University, and she argues that the music that most embodies the hallmarks of gangster rap, which is drug dealing, sexual excess, rogue capitalism, and distorted, violent portraits of black masculinity, dominates the airwaves and the media. So the music that is not doing this is kind of being pushed to the side. So because this is dominating the airwaves and dominating the media, it is highly commercialized and most sought after. So people think that in order to have a #1 record or #1 album or #1 video, we need to include these different hallmarks of gangster rap because it's what's going to promote us. Trisha Rose calls this the gangsta, pimp, hoe trinity, and she says that in any video you can see the gangsta, the hoe, and the pimp. So if we take a look at Jay-Z's Big
When it
Pimpin',
comes to birth
right?
control,
Of course, I should have prepared this in advance.
The birth control that goes in my arm. Because
So let's take a look at Big Pimpin' here. And let's take a look and we can see the gangster, the pimp, and the hoe.
You know I love them, hug them, love them, leave them, but I don't trust them, need them. Take them out the hood, keep them looking good, with diamond cuts and a freeze them. First time they fuss, I'm breezing. Talk about what's the reasons. I'm a pimpin' every sense in the word, why my better trust and believe them. In the cup where I keep them, till I need the word, till I need to beat it up, then it's beep beep, then I'm picking them up, then I play when they cook in the truck. Many chicks wanna put chicken fist in cuffs, divorce them and split his bucks. Just because you got good sex, I'ma break bread so you could be living it up. I cost with nothing, y'all.
So I'm going to pause it here because here we can really see what is happening in terms of the gangster, pimp, hoe trinity, right? So the guys in the video are gangsters, right? They're thugs. They're dressed like gangsters. They have what we talked about earlier, right? When we talked about symbolism, the wife beater, right? The A t-shirt. The men are also fully clothed. They have a lot of jewelry, which makes them pimps, right? So pimps have kind of evolved to really talk about men who have a lot of money, have a lot of women, are on yachts, right? This is in Brazil. If you continue with the video, you see them actually walking in Carnival. The women there are scantily cladly dressed, right? They are usually going to be portrayed in bikinis, like here. Champagne showers, pouring champagne all over themselves, are seen here again for the sexual pleasure of men, being obsequious, letting the men do these different things to them. So really we see that this one video from Jay-Z really has all of the hallmarks that Trisha Rose talks about in terms of the gangster pimp ho trinity. You can also watch Nelly's tip drill video, Day Burger, and Souffle to look at all the other examples. And you can also probably watch any modern video and try to find the gangster, the pimp, and the hoe that is portrayed, that Trisha Rose talks about. She also argues that these artists, right, that embody this gangster pimp ho trilogy sell the most records and therefore dominate the record industry, film, television, and radio. As a result, the most visible and most widely consumed hip-hop sets forth what she calls this troubled vision of ghetto street life that not only defines young, already at-risk black men and women to each other, but defines them to a large white audience as well, because the largest consumers of hip-hop music are white individuals. 70% of people who listen to hip-hop are white. And so if they have never had any contact with people that are black or African American, then that means that they're getting all of their information from media and probably from hip-hop videos, which is problematic. Also, these videos affect the way that men see themselves, that men see women, and women see themselves, right? It affects attitude and behavior about how a man and woman should act and how they should act towards one another. There's also a lot of homophobia that is happening in these videos as well too. Through lyrics and these different visual depictions in the videos, these male hip-hop artists attempt vigorously to demonstrate and emphasize their heterosexuality, right? We're men, we have a lot of women, so it's not just good enough to have one woman, they have to have many women, right, to prove their heterosexuality, and then of course put themselves in different types of sexual promiscuous situations with these women to again reinforce their heterosexuality. Sometimes they even use different types of words to reinforce that, words like fag, gay, homo. It not only demeans gays, lesbians, and other LGBTQ individuals, but it also is aimed to emasculate and insult their enemies. So one rapper might call another rapper a fag or a homo just to emasculate them and reinforce their own heterosexuality. Homophobic slurs like these equate being gay to being negative, to being weak, and also to being feminine, thus saying that femininity is also weak and negative. And it reifies what Trisha Rose says is this black masculinity that is everything opposite to homosexuality. There's this unspoken code of masculinity that really delegates matters of homosexuality, that it not be openly discussed, right? Which reinforces racial solidarity and propagates this hyper-masculine image of what the strong black man should be. We also see this happen a lot in Latin reggaeton and Latin hip-hop, right? What does it mean to be authentically Latino? This machista type of attitude. We'll speak more about that later. And then, of course, we see that sometimes there is this woman-on-woman action, this lesbianism, but it's only permissible in rap videos for the male enjoyment, right? Lesbian rappers are also not very much embraced by the hip-hop community. So if we see two women all over each other, pouring champagne on each other, it's for the male to enjoy. Again, reifying this heterosexual stance. Like I said before, it's not just hip-hop music. It's also found in country music. Bro country, like Luke Bryan, Country Girl, Shake It For Me, Florida Georgia Line. These different types of country also reify this not just misogynistic view, but this reinforcement of what it means to be heterosexual, right? This no homo type of stance. This misogynistic content that is found in country music usually it has this sense of entitlement. Women are entitled men are entitled to different types of resources, commodities, jobs, right? The woman is always the one breaking the heart, cheating. The man is crying about it and moving on. It's also the woman's fault, right? All the time. Hypersexualized. There's violence. Usually a lot of this in country music is mainly having to do with guns and shooting. And then, of course, these traditional patriarchal gender roles, what a man should do, what a woman should do. Being hypermasculine also associates masculinity with strength and femininity with weakness. There are a couple of country musicians who are trying to change the way in which that is being portrayed. Specifically, we can look at Miranda Lambert and Maddie and Tay and how they're really singing about their lived experiences and how to combat this misogyny that is portrayed in country music. Like I mentioned before, also Latin pop and reggaeton is also a place where we can find very, very misogynistic content. Jiggy Drama, Contra la Pared, really has some visuals in his video and lyrics that talk about throwing women against walls and raping them and being forced into different types of sexual acts. De La Ghetto, featuring a whole bunch of artists, I didn't want to enlist them here. They have two songs, La Groupie and Ahi Ahi Ahi, which really talks again about making women submissive and they have to succumb to him sexually. Luis Fonsi and Daddy Yankee, Despacito. If you listen to the song, which is very catchy by the way, you really look at the lyrics, and there's a couple lyrics in there that really talk about going past your safe zones, and he's going to put you in the danger zone and force you to kiss him, and if I want to kiss, you better come over here and give it to me. So again, forcing women to be obsequious. Alexis and Fido, Mala Conducta, again really talking about the way in which women, again, are going to be sexually promiscuous and obsequious to men. So there's a lot of hypersexual content in Latino pop and reggaeton. There's this machista attitude. It really is again about entitlement, that the man should be able to do whatever he wants, have as many women as he wants. Violence is portrayed in here, not so much in terms of guns like in country music, but in physical violence, holding women down, forcing them to do things, right? And then we see again this pimp-ho dichotomy happening a lot, where the Latino pop stars are wearing a lot of jewelry, wearing a lot of expensive clothing, shooting their videos in front of yachts and really fancy cars, and having a lot of women dancing around them. So again, we see this pimp-ho kind of thing happening in Latino pop and reggaeton. But there are some counter portrayals, right? So I want to leave you with some positive notes of things that also happen in hip-hop. Now, these different types of hip-hop and R&B songs aren't as lucrative and aren't as popular in mainstream radio and media as they should be, but they're still out there, right? Like Queen Latifah, Ladies First and Unity, Eve, Who's That Girl, Lupe Fiasco, Bad Bitch. In fact, I put the Lupe Fiasco video on your Blackboard, and I want you to watch it because this is a great video. The first time I watched it, I was just in awe. He really does sing a lot, not just about traditional patriarchal roles, but also about what white commercialized hip-hop is doing to the black community. So watch that. That's on your Blackboard as well too. Lauryn Hill, Do Up That Thing. Tupac has some problematic songs too, but he has some good ones. Keep Your Head Up and Dear Mama. MIA, Bad Girls. TLC, What About Your Friend. So there's a lot of counter portrayals as well. As you can look here, most of them though are done by women, which is why we need more women in positions of power and doing things, right? Some other counter portrayals for homophobia are Sam Smith, Jussie Smollett, Frank Ocean, Ricky Martin, Steve Grand. He is a out gay country artist. Ty Hendren, Billy Gilman, Macklemore, and Ryan Lewis. All counter portrayals in terms of combating homophobia in music. So this is some activity time that I usually do in the face-to-face class, and I ask students to get into groups, and then we look at the lyrics to these 4 songs here. Nicki Minaj and Drake, Truffle Butter. If you don't know what truffle butter is, I'm not going to tell you. Go to Urban Dictionary. Yes, nasty. Fetty Wap, Trap Queen, Pitbull and Neo, Time of Our Lives, and Flow Rider, GDFR, or get the fuck, good, I can't remember what it stands for, but I know the F is a cuss word, right? And then I have the students go through the lyrics and check out all of the misogynistic and homophobic lyrics, and then share with one another. So if you want to do that, you can look up these 4 songs here and just look through the lyrics yourself and see the different types of homophobic and misogynistic comments that come up. Even something as mainstream as Pitbull and Neo, Time of Our Lives, has a lot of misogynistic and objectification in the lyrical content as well.